If you are new here, welcome to the expert session, where every week we invite an expert to speak about topics related to digital marketing and how to attract your target audience online. So the topics will be sent via email and shared in our Facebook group, which you are tuning in live from. So be sure to be on the mailing list. All the replays will be up in this Facebook group as well once this live stream is done. You can also catch up on a lot of earlier sessions, which are also jam-packed with a lot of actionable takeaways. So there will be a Q&A at the end of this live stream where you can ask anything you want. You can even ask anytime during the presentation as well, but we will just fix all the Q&A at the end. So without further ado, I'm very excited to be here with Lauren today to share all about web accessibility. And honestly, I was like, what is web accessibility? Until she explained it to me, and I realized how applicable it can be to every one of us and how we might be missing out a huge chunk of audience by not optimizing our blog pages for web accessibility. So without further ado, I'm gonna let her take over the floor, introduce herself, and share all her insights.
Great. Hey, everybody. Yeah, so this is, like Isabel said, feel free to comment at any point. I definitely would love just interaction throughout this presentation. It'll be me mostly talking, so I would love any sort of input that you guys have. So I'll get started a little bit. So a little bit about who I am. I'm an SEO specialist. I've been working with websites for 14 years. I learned SEO by starting my own blog, and I started that about 5 years ago. And web accessibility I've been doing for 4 years now. And I've kind of changed. I've left blogging behind, and now I help bloggers and businesses with growing their online presence. I am somebody that truly believes that technology should never hinder anybody. It should only help them. So my goal with my business is to break down barriers that hold people back from sharing and receiving information on the web. And currently I'm working on my web accessibility certification. So just to talk a little bit about what is web accessibility, it sounds a little overwhelming, but a lot of us know, or a lot of us have experienced what accessibility is in our day-to-day lives. So in the physical world, if you think about walking into a building and it has a set of stairs, there's also probably a ramp to get into the building as well that accommodates people that use wheelchairs. When you're in buildings, there might be sets of stairs, but if there's sets of stairs, there's probably an elevator as well to accommodate people who use wheelchairs. So things like Braille menus, throughout our physical world, we have a lot of ways we're accommodating people with disabilities. And that all stems from a law in the US called the Americans with Disabilities Act. And I won't go too much into that because that's kind of boring, but you get the idea that basically we have laws in place to prohibit the discrimination against individuals with disabilities in our day-to-day life. But the new thing is the world of the web. And websites have always just been, you just kind of make your own website and you're not even really thinking about, okay, is this usable for somebody with disabilities? Because about 1 in 5 people have some sort of disability. So that's about 20% of people using the web have a disability. And disabilities can range, it doesn't have to be just somebody that uses a wheelchair. It could be somebody with a cognitive disability, maybe they have a seizure disorder, it could be a physical disability, it could be blindness, low vision, deafness, things like that. So when people use computers, you have to consider some people can't use mouses, or mice. I don't know what the plural of a mouse is, but some people can only use a keyboard. Some people can't see their screen because they're blind. So they have to use software on their computer that reads their screen to them aloud. So this is all just kind of a little bit of background to give you context on how different people use their computers, how different people navigate the web. And the internet is a great place that can give everybody an opportunity to learn, but without the proper design, it can inhibit those people that are trying to visit your website. And there's laws that are being created and developed. So for example, in Ontario, Canada, all websites have to be accessible. businesses can get fined, I think, like $100,000 a day if their website isn't accessible. So the trend is moving in the direction of needing accessible websites, that we're going to have accessible websites. So there's going to be standards that are put in place. And not to get a little too technical here, but those standards come in the form of something called Wacag Standards. And basically there's like 5 different guidelines that websites should follow in order to be as accessible as possible. The big question that I get asked sometimes is like, yes, we should be making our websites accessible, but like, why do I have to care about it right now? And like I said before, 1 out of 5 people that try to visit your website have a disability. So, if you have a blog and you are trying to get, affiliate revenue, you're trying to get ad revenue, you're losing certain amounts of revenue if 20% of the people that visit your website can't use it. There's a couple statistics here that I have for you. So they did a study on e-commerce websites, so specifically people that are shopping, and 71% of shoppers with disabilities will click away from a website if it's too difficult to use. So these click away customers are about 10% of online shopping revenue. So that's a big percentage, especially if you're making a lot on your website. That could definitely affect your sales, your affiliate revenue. And typically what happens too is if someone comes to your website and it's too difficult to use, oftentimes they will leave your website, and if they see your website in search results again, they won't go to it on Google because they know, like, okay, that person's website isn't easy to use, so I'm going to go to this other website that I know is. Another thing is that I talked a little bit about laws before. Lawsuits are becoming a more real concern. So Domino's Pizza, that's a big pizza chain in the US. Recently, they were sued and they lost a case because a blind man couldn't use the website to order a pizza. So that case was a pretty big one in the accessibility community because it set kind of a precedent. And now there are lawyers who are going out and they're finding websites to sue that aren't compliant with these standards. I'm in a couple different Facebook groups where I occasionally hear about a website owner getting an email, and the email says, hey, one of your images doesn't have an alt tag on it. And I'm going to sue you for that if you don't add an alt tag, because a blind person doesn't know what that image actually is representing. That's another reason just to consider that the internet is moving in that direction of wanting these sort of standards. And also Google is now factoring in usability when it's determining how to rank websites. So it's moving in a direction of really favoring more accessible sites. And I want to talk a little bit about that. So if you are trying to rank your blog on Google, you probably know about the big update this summer about the core web vital. That's like a big release. It affected a lot of people's traffic and sites and caused a lot of mayhem, but they've now set the standard of wanting more usable sites. So they came out with the mobile usability that they care about. They came out with different web vitals, and I wanted to kind of talk through some of those and how they relate to somebody that might have a disability, just to kind of show the overlap between Google's updates and accessibility. There was an update within the core web vitals, one of the items is called the Cumulative Layout Shift, so that's CLS. This is measuring the visual stability of your site as it loads. So it's measuring if you are loading your website, are things shifting? Are buttons moving? Is text moving? Are images moving? And that shifting elements on your page can be really distracting. So if somebody that struggles with mobility is trying to click a link on your page and all of a sudden it goes from where their mouse is to like another section of the page, that can be really frustrating for people. That can be distracting and overwhelming. So that's definitely something that's related to accessibility. In terms of like mobile usability, three of the mobile usability aspects that Google's tracking really do overlap with accessibility. So one of them is content wider than your screen. So if you're on your phone and we're always scrolling like up and down, if you have to scroll left and right, that can be really difficult for people with mobility issues. It can cause issues for people with low vision. Although it affects you and I probably at some degree, it can affect people that have disabilities at a greater degree. Another one is the text is too small to read. That's another one for anybody that has low vision. Like I know my parents, they have to change their settings on their iPhone so that the text is really big and bold so that their text messages are massive. And I can laugh at them sometimes for that, but at the same time, that's how they use their phone so that it's easy for them to read the content on their phone. So if the text is too small on your website, that can really deter people from continuing to read on your website. It's too difficult, it's frustrating. And then another aspect of Google's update was something called clickable elements are too close together. And this is, again, difficult for people with mobility issues. So if you're on your phone and you click a button and you think you're clicking the Contact Us page and you end up clicking the About Us page because the buttons are too close, that can definitely create frustration for you and I. And it's even more difficult for somebody that might have a mobility issue. So Google's really taking these things into account through all their changes and updates over the summer. It really showed me just the overlap of usability and accessibility. These types of metrics are all things that are vital to retaining visitors on your website. Okay, so I want to talk a little bit about how accessibility relates to SEO on like a more general level. Google's website itself says that everybody should be able to access and enjoy the web, and that we are committing to making that a reality. So that really tells me just how important Google is taking accessibility, even if it's just small, minute steps like the core Web Vitals update. But just to talk through some things that bloggers might already be doing that do relate to accessibility, I just want to talk through a couple of things. So one of the things is, your metadata title and descriptions. Okay, so your titles and descriptions, they're the things that we see in standard Google results. The title we see, and we see the description. These are actually really important to somebody who is blind because that's what is read to them as they are navigating your page. So one of the first things when somebody hits your site, one of the first things that a blind person hears is your title and your description. So making sure that those titles and descriptions are concise, they're accurate, and they're keyword rich is a really good place to start as you're working towards a more accessible site. Another thing is your alt text on images. We know that alt text is important for SEO. We know that you can put keywords into your alt text and that can help you boost your rankings, right? It's a ranking factor. I like to take it a step further because a blind person who comes to your website and comes across an image, they're read that alt text. So I always say to my clients, it's important that you describe what's happening in the image. So if you are writing a blog post on the best apple pie recipe and you have a picture of the dough in your mixer and you're really trying to show some sort of important instruction, you want to definitely add that into the alt text. Because that's going to help a blind person know exactly what you're trying to convey with that image. Or if you have an image on like a statistic, maybe it has a bar graph, make the alt text, include the keyword you're trying to rank for, but also include what's going on in the graph, include the statistic you're sharing with people. Another example is, writing descriptive link text. So making sure that, if you have links on your page, and they're taking you to another blog post that you've written, make sure that the link text doesn't just say, click here. Make sure it says, click here for my apple pie recipe. So just making sure that it's a really descriptive link text that gives a clear indication of where the person's going to when they click that link. It's very important. In terms of like how this is affecting people's rankings right now. If 1 in 5 people that visit your website run into issues, they will likely leave your website, and that can affect your bounce rate. If somebody comes to your website and immediately runs into an issue and leaves, that affects your bounce rate, and your bounce rate is a ranking factor in Google. So definitely something to consider there. There's a couple big companies that invested a lot of time into making their websites accessible. This American Life back in 2011 did this. Their website saw in just a few months a 7% increase in search traffic. Legal and General Group, they increased their search traffic by 50% by making their website accessible. And then CNET, C-N-E-T, CNET, they saw a 30% increase in traffic from Google after doing some accessibility work on their site. So those are all examples of how making a more accessible website is something Google likes because it helps the users when they come to your website. Definitely important. And then, if we look into the future from a web accessibility standpoint, it's always important that we are future-proofing websites as much as possible, just to make sure their SEO strategy is viable for years to come. That's why, for anybody that's teaching SEO, you're probably trying to teach the best way to do SEO, the best strategies, not anything that's spammy or black hat. You're trying to stick to white hat methods because that's going to be future-proofing websites as much as possible against any sort of crazy algorithm updates. And the interesting thing is that Google has actually been measuring accessibility on all of our websites for a long time. They've been using a testing tool, and it's a similar testing tool to PageSpeed Insights, but it tests accessibility of how accessible your website is. So if they've been monitoring this for a while now, it's not far-fetched to think that accessibility could be the next big algorithm update because the infrastructure is already in place for them to be monitoring how accessible our websites are. I wanted to talk through just a couple additional examples of how you can make your website accommodating for those with disabilities. One of those is installing an accessibility plugin. So these accessibility plugins can typically allow users to change how your site displays. So it might help users make text bigger. It can help with adding contrast. So if you think to describe what contrast is, if you think about reading black text on a white background, that's very easy. But if you have like navy text on a black background, that's going to be much harder to read, if not impossible. Just making sure that the text on your site has that high contrast. Don't have any sort of like pale pink against a pink background. It might be harder to read. And if you're wondering, like, is this high enough contrast? I would say if you're questioning it, just go with a more higher contrast. And then, like I said before, add that alt text to images. Very easy to do. Just make it descriptive. If you are writing a blog, make sure that you're using short paragraphs. So 1 to 2 sentences. That way people don't have like a wall of text that they're trying to sort through visually. Use headers to organize related content. So this helps people that are using programs that are reading their screen to them. They can understand just the different headers and how the text below that relates to the header. So it helps people navigate websites a lot easier if you use headers. If you have a podcast, I recommend adding some way to get to a transcript. So if you're adding the transcript to the page, or if you're adding a link to a document that somebody could download, that's helpful for anybody that is deaf, that still wants to enjoy your podcast. I always recommend embedding YouTube videos. YouTube offers captions, it offers transcripts, which are great for anybody that is blind or deaf. And then look at the links on your website. Are your links a similar color to the other text on your page? If your links are like a dark gray and your text is black, that's hard for people to visually tell that something's a link. So I recommend bolding your links or underlining your links, make them some sort of differentiation. So when somebody's looking at your page, they know, okay, that's a link if I click on that. If it kind of blends in with the rest of the text on the page, somebody might not know to click it. And that's just not even a point just for somebody, just for accessibility, but in general, to increase your conversion rate, it's better to have a more bold color to indicate links on your page. And then lastly, sign up forms. So if you have any sort of like sign up for my newsletter, any sort of form like that, just make sure that each of the form fields have a label with them. So to indicate, okay, this field I need to put in a name, this field I need to put in an email address. Those types of things help users to know, okay, I need to put in this specific piece of information in each field. Okay, so that's an overview of everything. And I can show you guys some examples just to show you guys visually. Okay, so I just wanted to talk through a couple of things. This website's obviously from like 2003 or something, but we could still kind of go through just a couple examples here to show you what I mean. Taking a look at this text up here, like the Free Penguins text, you'll see that it's a darker blue and that the background is a lighter blue. For some people, this might be difficult to read though. I would recommend, making sure, this is just an example of how this text might be difficult for some people to read. Whereas if you look at, this text on this white background, it's much bolder. You can read it easier. So that's what I mean when I talk about contrast with your text versus your background colors. Down here, you'll see these links just say click here, but they don't really indicate where they're going to. So from an SEO perspective, from an accessibility perspective, I definitely recommend not having just click here text for your links, but actually using either a keyword that you're trying to target, but also make sure you're including where the user's actually going to. This is just another example. So this is the tool that I use to check whether or not the contrast is enough on websites. So this is just another example. Like you can see how hard this text is to read on the white background, but if you make this that, it's a lot easier to read. So just kind of considering those things as you're looking at the design on your own websites can definitely help not just people with disabilities, but everybody in general. And then this is just another example of really small text. Somebody might struggle trying to see the text on your screen if it's a really tiny font size. And then also just another example of the contrast of the text here, how that's kind of hard to read. Yeah. So does anyone have any questions?
Really insightful. I feel like it's also very applicable just for general SEO purposes to rank like images or in order to improve the user experience as well, not just for people with disabilities. So that's really like good learning points over there. I was wondering, because for example, contrast and all that, it's rather subjective. So is there any guidelines where you can tell whether your content, your design meets web accessibility guidelines?
Yeah. So there are, like in terms of the contrast, I can just share my screen again so I can show you guys. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I love this tool. This one shows specifically for contrast. If it's green, that means you're good. But if it's red, that means that's not high enough contrast. So you can always put in your background color in this tool. I can even drop the link just so that other people can try that out for themselves.
Yeah.
It's really easy and it tells you if it's high enough contrast or not. There are plugins that you can use as well. There's one called Axe, A-X-E, and that scans your whole website and tells you a bunch of different information on any sort of issues that you might come across.
Yeah. Speaking of plugins, so like you mentioned, AXE is one. What other plugins do you recommend to improve web accessibility?
Ooh, that's a good one. I know WordPress has a lot of different ones. You can usually just search like accessibility plugin. If you've seen on websites like a little blue circle with a little man inside, if you ever go to a website that has one of those, just click it and you'll start getting a little menu with options on how to changing the layout and visual design of the site.
So basically what the plugins do is when you click on that main button, it just transforms your website into something more easier to consume.
Yeah, yeah, yep. And it
Oh,
doesn't,
interesting.
yeah, it's pretty cool. So it lets you like zoom the website. It lets you change the contrast. It might put the website into like a dark mode, like you know how like the dark mode versus light mode,
Mm-hmm.
black background on white text or with white text. So it just kind of encompasses a couple different visual distinctions. So I would say that helps anybody with, you know, visual issues, other disabilities like somebody who's blind, you might need a little more work to get that to get your website accessible.
Yeah, wow. To be honest, I haven't really seen any website that really optimizes for web accessibility. Yeah, do you have statistics or have you had any experience with a website that does not have versus one that actually has their website optimized for web accessibility and the difference in traffic? Do you have any data on that?
Oh, that's good. Like I had some statistics on websites that had changed to a more, and they saw more an increase in traffic. So that was like This American Life, CNET, and a
Mm.
legal group.
I mean, it'd be good to see if like it really does increase in traffic and if you really do attract the people with disabilities by optimizing your website for web accessibility.
Yeah,
So that would be good data, I think.
yeah, definitely. Yeah, because I know federal websites in the US, all federal websites have to be accessible. Or if you are like a contractor that works with the federal government, your website has to be accessible. So those would be examples like any .gov website out there.
Mm.
.gov websites are all accessible. And the big ones too are like universities. So universities have to have accessible websites if they want to get funding from the federal government.
Ooh.
So like universities are big ones.
Yeah.
There are e-commerce websites. I'm working with an e-commerce client right now, and they want to have an accessible website. So it'll be interesting to see. We're still in the process, but it'll
Mm.
be interesting to see how their traffic changes. You know,
Yeah, for sure. And do you know if it hinders website speed or anything like that by kind of having this option available on the website?
The plugin can always, if you go the plugin route, that can definitely affect website speed. If you don't go there's ways to make websites accessible without the plugin, but that takes like a software development and it's more involved. And that typically doesn't affect the speed of the website. If anything, it makes it cleaner. So
Mm.
it's really organizing the code and everything like that.
Yeah, but so I guess the easiest way for any regular website blogger or website creator to really have web accessibility optimized is to download a plugin.
Yes. Yeah, definitely.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool,
Yeah.
cool.
I would say that's a good
Awesome.
start. It's a great start. Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. Do you guys have any other questions? Otherwise, it's been a really informative session.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's kind of a good reminder that you have to put your alt text, you need to put your meta descriptions and your anchor text and all that. So it's
Yeah.
really great information over there.
Yeah, it definitely, like, it's interesting just how much overlaps, you know, so many ranking factors overlap with accessibility. So it'll be interesting to see how that changes in the future.
Yeah.
So yeah, yeah.
Cool. Awesome. Yeah, thank you for your time. It's really great meeting you and hearing from you.
You too, Isabel.
I think the name of the plugin AXE, right? Was it?
Is a plugin to analyze whether or not your website is accessible. In terms of plugin names, I don't have any on hand, but I can definitely get some. And then do you want me to, how do you want me to do that? Should I just maybe comment on this live?
Yeah, you can do that.
Okay, perfect.
And yeah, if you have any other notes and all that, you can also send it to me. I will be sharing the replay and also reposting on my other social media.
Okay, awesome. Great.
Do you want to share your contact information over here or?
Oh yeah, yeah, let me do that. Here, I can share my screen and that way it'll show up on the replay as well. Do you see that okay? Okay, so you can follow me at lauren.b.newton.sco and this is on Instagram. My website is laurenbnewton.com. I do offer web accessibility packages. So I did put together a little offer for the members of your group. It's a steep discount on my basic accessibility package. So you can go to laurenvnewton.com/accessibility.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you very much. You guys, if you're interested in optimizing your website for WebSE, definitely check Lauren's website out.
Yeah, great.
Cool. All
Thank you.
right, I'll see you again.
All right, thanks.
Cheers. Bye. Bye,
Bye.
everyone. See you in the next live session.